Everyone, welcome to the 8th meeting of the House State Government Committee. I call the meeting to order today. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Representative Bojanowski. Here. Representative Bowling. Here. Representative Bratcher.
Here.
Representative Chester Burton.
Here.
Representative Graham.
Here.
Representative Heath.
Here.
Representative Heverin.
Here.
Representative Herron. Representative Hodgson.
Here.
Representative Huff.
Here.
Representative Johnson. Representative Maddox. Representative Rawlings.
Here.
Representative Tate.
Here.
Representative Tipton.
Here.
Representative Williams. Representative Witten.
Here.
Representative Imes.
Here.
Representative Hale.
Here. We do have a quorum today, and we are constituted to do business in this committee. Please bow your heads. Join me for just a moment of prayer. Thank you, Father, for this beautiful day. Bless this committee and every member that's on it. In your precious name, amen. Amen. Thank you. Just a quick reminder to silence your cell phones today during the meeting for those in the room and those on the committee as well. And if you miss a vote, and or maybe some of the members possibly, I think, are moving in and out of possibly another committee. So if you come in and miss a vote, we will recognize you after we conclude one piece of legislation and on to another. Before we go to the first item, is there anyone today in the on the committee that has any guests you would like to recognize? Seeing no guests, we are ready to proceed. The first item on the agenda today is House Bill 575, sponsored by Representative Heath. House Bill 575 is an act relating to acquisition of agricultural land. Representative Heath, would you please come to the table and, for the record, introduce yourself, and also have the gentleman, the guest that's with you, to introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Thank you for having me here today to present this bill. Richard Heath, State Representative for House District 2, which includes all of Graves County and part of McCracken County.
John C. Morris, Executive Director of the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. There is a motion, or there is a committee substitute on this House. There is a motion, and there is a second. And yes, ma'am. Before we adopt the committee sub, Representative Bojanowski, you may ask the question on the committee sub.
Yes, could you explain the difference between the sub and the original bill?
Yes, I would be happy to. Page 6, subsection 5, it exempts any licensed attorney, title insurance company, title insurance underwriter, or title insurance agent, or other third party involved in real property transaction from being held civilly or criminally liable for a person or entity providing a fraudulent or incorrect affidavit. And then also on pages 6 and 7, it designates the order of payment for the proceeds of a sale. And then also on page 7, subsection 3, exempts a subsequent title holder from civil criminal liability and for foreclosure. You're welcome.
There has been a motion and a second on the committee sub. All in favor of adoption of the sub, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The committee sub is adopted before us. And Representative Heath, the floor is yours. You may give us the discussion and the rundown on what House Bill 575 is and what it does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. House Bill 575 introduces measures to prohibit the acquisition of Kentucky's agriculture land by nations who have been identified by the federal government as those who we do not enjoy friendly diplomatic relationships with, as well as non-resident aliens, foreign agents, trustees, fiduciaries associated with the government of those nations. So this is not an effort to isolate us, but rather to ensure that the interests of our farmers and the security of our agriculture sector are protected. The bill references federal code so that we will not have to come in and constantly change the bill. And There's 24 countries on that federal code. The top 8 are Belarus, Burma, China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, Venezuela. Russia is further down the list, but that federal code really distinguishes who this bill applies to. You may remember last year we passed House Bill 500, not only out of this committee, but off the House floor with overwhelming bipartisan support. It fell victim to the short session. We just literally ran out of time. But this did allow us to meet over the interim and talked with parties that were affected by the bill. So some of the things that are different in this bill that weren't in House Bill 500, in addition to the bill, is that it establishes the Kentucky Foreign Investment Review Board. And just for your information, if this passes, becomes law, we will be the only state in the United States that has such a board. This board will consist of 5 members, including representatives from the Department of Agriculture, from the Cabinet of Economic Development, Secretary of State, Kentucky Office of Homeland Security, and a citizen member with expertise in real estate that would be jointly appointed by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. So it's important to note that this legislation does not hinder the operation of existing foreign businesses, and there are some in Kentucky. There are some in western Kentucky and my end of the state. Basically, they're grandfathered in. But Kentucky has benefited greatly from foreign investment, and we welcome those who have no ulterior motives. I want to give you an example of a couple of businesses in western end of Kentucky. One is fish processing operation. You've heard of Asian carp. There's a lot of Asian carp fished from the waters of Kentucky rivers, and this processing facility processes that meat and actually exports it. Another one is in Ballard County in Wickliffe. It used to be a paper mill. Then it was closed for a couple of years. China bought that facility, and now they produce cardboard that is used in making cardboard boxes at that facility. So they're there in good faith and acting under good faith, and we're not trying to run those out of the country. Another caveat of the bill is that any of the countries, like, for example, the 2 I just mentioned, if they want to expand and they need to purchase land adjoining their current operation, then they would be permitted to do that. This bill exempts them from expanding. So let's see, let me get back to my notes. Additionally, the bill establishes a comprehensive reporting system, which was something that was lacking. So deeds conveying agricultural land must include an affidavit ensuring a compliance with the Act's requirements, and county clerks are required to submit monthly reports to the Kentucky Foreign Investment Review Board. This information will then be forwarded on to the Committee of Foreign Investment in the United States via the United States Department of Treasury. So as a way to address concerns about potential illegal implications, the legislation includes provisions protecting attorneys, title companies, underwriters, some of the things that we just talked about in the committee sub. And then finally, the bill includes measures to enforce compliance. So if a foreign business, whether it's an agent or trustee or a fiduciary, violates the act, then they will be required to divest themselves of that agricultural land within a year. So judicial foreclosure proceedings may be initiated, and the proceeds from the sale of the prioritized to address delinquent taxes. In other words, when the property is sold, the proceeds would go to pay off the taxes, pay off mortgages and lien holders, and then the rest would go into the general fund. So in conclusion, this bill aims to strike a balance between encouraging foreign investment in our state and safeguarding the interest of our agriculture and national security. It is a language that has been crafted through collaboration and compromise from many individuals, Kentucky Farm Bureau, the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, some other organizations like our Corn Growers Association, soybean growers, poultry growers. We've had conversations. I've had conversations with those commodity groups. And here with me today is is Chauncey Morris, and I'm going to let him comment a little bit on the bill before we move forward.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do echo what Chairman Heath said. We do support this bill. Here's the reason why. We believe it keeps the door open for reputable private businesses from some of these countries to continue to invest here in Kentucky. This issue is important to the horse industry because the total value of equine-related assets, including land here in the Commonwealth, is $27.7 billion and 900,000 acres. We know that from the latest 2022 University of Kentucky Equine Survey. So it's hugely important, keeps the door open to reputable business individuals from around the world, allows the means via the Foreign Investment Review Board to pierce the corporate veil and ascertain this.
Representative Heath, would you like to say anything else?
I think we're ready for questions.
Is there a motion on the bill? There has been a motion made by Representative Johnson, and there is a second by Representative Huff. We do have some questions before we take the vote. Representative Heath, first off, I just have one question, and then we'll go to the folks that are in the queue to ask questions. You mentioned the list of countries, and I think you said it was 20. Was it 25 or 22?
24.
24.
Yes.
How was that determined? What was the determining factor on those particular nations?
Sure, that's a federal list that's referenced. It's 22 CFR Section 126.1, and that's a list of countries that the U.S. will not sell weapons to. And that's the list that we chose so that as that list changes over time, whether countries drop off the list or countries are added to the list, then we don't have to come back and update this.
So in turn, and that was a list that was basically provided to us by the federal government of entities across the world that was not friendly with us.
Yes, that was actually the list that we chose to use as a guide for the bill.
Thank you. Our first question is Representative Bojanowski. You may proceed, please.
Yes, thank you. So I did go through and read 22 CFR 126.1, and like you just mentioned, it has to do with weapons. It's under subchapter M, which relates to international traffic in arms regulations. I mean, it's a big stretch from international traffic in arms regulation to the purchase of agricultural land, and we're not dealing here with defense articles or defense services. So can you just explain, what are we afraid of in having these entities do business in Kentucky?
Yes, our concern is those entities could buy land adjacent to our military bases or close enough that they could spy on our military bases, and that's one of the goals of this bill is to prohibit that from happening. They tried to do that in South Dakota, close to an Air Force base. They tried to do it in Texas. They were not successful. The government intervened. This is a preemptive strike to let other countries know where Kentucky stands on this issue. If you are at odds with the United States and the United States is not willing to sell you weapons, then they consider you maybe non-friendly. I don't know if hostile is the correct word to use, but it gives us a place to work from to say if you're on that list, then we don't want you owning our Kentucky farmland, especially close to our military bases.
If I may ask one follow-up?
Yes.
So with this bill, could the countries listed in 22 CFR 126.1 continue to purchase land that's zoned for commercial or industrial uses?
Yeah, this bill doesn't address those. There is federal legislation that would, and so we decided not to try to reach out to every possible scenario that could happen. We felt like it would make the bill too cumbersome, and we felt like we wanted to get a skeleton in place, and if we see going forward that we need to come back and tweak this and address other things that aren't currently in the bill, then we're kind of leaving that door open.
Thank you.
Representative Tipton, you are next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Heath, for y'all's presentation today. Unlike Representative Bojanowski, I did not look up the U.S. Code. This is dealing with agricultural land, and on page 1, section 1, it defines agricultural land as the same meaning as NC USC section 3508. Do you have the definition for that?
I do not. I should have, but I didn't bring it with me.
Okay, I was just curious if it's based on acres use or whatever. It's something we can look up, and
Yes.
I'll certainly be looking at. If I could have a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go right ahead, sir.
I'm a licensed real estate broker, so I deal with a lot of big properties, a lot of other people's does. And as I understand this, just so I'm clear, that after the effective date of this act, anytime that a piece of property is transferred, at the closing, it would be required to have an affidavit stating that that purchaser is not an entity or person or entity from one of these countries on this list. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, when you say any property is transferred, of course, any property that is considered
Under the definition.
under that definition of agricultural land, yes.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I foresee some additional continuing education in my real estate classes going forward, but thank you for bringing this forward. And I would make one more comment. In America, we're very blessed to have an abundant food supply. We're so blessed. And I would have concern that the countries that want to do us harm may not necessarily attack us. But if they were to control large areas of agricultural land in this country, that could be very detrimental to our food security in this country. So I appreciate you bringing this forward.
As an example of that, the war going on in Ukraine now, Russia owns a lot of land in Ukraine, agricultural land, and they went in and plowed the crops under to deliberately disrupt the food supply.
Next on the list is Representative Graham.
Thank you,
may
Mr.
proceed,
Chair.
sir.
I just want to ask the question, excuse me, in regards to the cabinet.
Yes.
Have you talked with the cabinet about this particular bill, and where do they stand in taking on this this bill and possibly passing it again?
Yes, additional responsibility. We've talked indirectly through some of their members, and we pointed out to them, it doesn't, I didn't mention it in my opening comments, but it's let's say Department of Agriculture, Commissioner of Agriculture, or his or her designee. So his or her designee could be a member of their staff, or it could be someone else in the Commonwealth that they feel like would be qualified to sit on that board.
What about the Economic Development Cabinet?
Same with them, their designee. So we didn't want to burden the cabinets if they were understaffed or didn't have the people to sit on that board. Then they could designate someone, and the person they designate would not have to be currently on their payroll.
So what you're saying is that you have talked to them, or you have not talked to them, or you have not talked with them in terms of a deeper discussion.
Right. I have talked to them indirectly through their legislative liaison that came to me and said, for the example I used, Commissioner of Agriculture, there was concerns brought that we were going to put some undue burdens on them, and we pointed out it doesn't have to come from somebody that's on your payroll. You can designate, your designee can be whoever you choose. So yes, I have talked to them indirectly through their legislative liaison.
I would think that, and I'm not being critical, I'm just asking the question, why, if we're going to do this, why there have not been detailed discussions in regards to how we're going to do it and why we're doing it and those things that impact us here in Kentucky.
Yes.
So I'm not being critical, I'm just asking those questions because I would think that we would get something like this. I think there should be discussions, deep discussions about what this will do and how it will impact. And the other thing is, you said that the other countries, the other states, have not done anything in regards to this particular piece of legislation. I would, I guess I'm concerned about why they haven't and we are, and are we doing this in a way that is not, that we need it right now.
Sure.
To an extent. And I understand what my colleague said earlier about making sure that we maintain safety in regards to lands that are bought by those coming from the outside.
Yes, go ahead.
Representative Graham, that's actually why I'm here and have engaged on this. Our industry is engaged on this particular issue. There has been legislation of this type passed in other states that are actually contiguous to Kentucky, and they've actually shut the door. And what they've done is said that no countries that are on this list are allowed to own assets, agricultural assets in their states, and are in the process of having to divest or sell those assets. That's something that, to be very clear, my industry, we do not have any farm owners from these countries that are listed on this particular list. We'd love to, though, if they were reputable private citizens that were not agents of their governments that were maybe going to do some sort of malintent to the Commonwealth of Kentucky or the United States. So there have been other states that have enacted similar legislations, but they are just shutting the door.
Thank you.
Representative Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all. You kind of answered one of the questions that I was going to ask, but I also would like to ask, has this type of legislation been ruled unconstitutional in other states, or is there anything currently in litigation regarding a legislation such as this?
Not that I'm aware of. There's states from Maine to California that have passed this legislation over the past few years. So we're not the first horse out the gate. And I'm not aware of any of that legislation that's been passed down in other states that's been struck down by the courts. Haven't researched it. It just hasn't come to my attention. So when I mentioned the review board, that is unique to this bill and to Kentucky. The states that have passed similar legislation do not have a review board, and I appreciate Chauncey Morris for bringing that to our attention and working with us on getting that verbiage. So and I want to say it's 15 other states that have already passed similar legislation. There's several states considering it now while they're in session, just like we are. But the review board is unique to Kentucky.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up, please.
Yes, ma'am.
If we find out that there are some litigation that is currently happening or something has been weighed unconstitutional, is that going to change potentially the language in what we're doing, or would it put this on halt as far as if we should move forward with this in Kentucky?
If we see something that we feel like that we need to change between now and final passage through the Senate, then I'm open to taking a look at it. We will probably see some changes come out of the Senate. Just since I filed this bill, the Kentucky, the land people that I was talking about a while ago, let me get you the name. It's Title Insurance Agency. After I filed the bill, they came to me with some concerns they had, and that's where that committee sub came from. Since then, I've had one or two others come forward and say, well, have you thought about this or this? And I said, no, we wanted to get the bill filed because we're 2/3 of the way through the session, and let everybody take a look at it. And if you have suggestions that you think there are unintended consequences or something we need to do to make it better, I'm open for suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hamron.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Representative Heath. I had some questions last year, and so I appreciate you working, continue to make the bill better. I absolutely understand the intent. One question I have is, does the ag development piece relate to all ag land transactions or just for foreign persons? Would it be farmer to farmer that would have to sign the affidavit?
Yeah, right now, the way it stands, unless it's changed in the Senate, the affidavit is for all transactions. And the reason is we're trying to track what's going on when farmland sells. We didn't know how to separate it out at the local level from those transactions that were just being done by foreign agents or not. So we're capturing all that information going forward. If we find out that's overly burdensome and the people that are having to do that can come to us with suggestions on how to improve it, then we can take a look at it next session or whatever. We realize that any time there's a piece of legislation of this magnitude, there's things that we didn't think about, unintended consequences. Once more people get involved and they're actually involved in day-to-day transactions, then hopefully they'll come to us with some suggestions and tell us how we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish without causing undue burden to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Can I have a follow-up statement?
Yes.
I appreciate it, Representative Heath. I just know, specifically my district with Glendale, what is that going to look like? And I know that my farmers will come to me and ask questions. So just asking on the front end is helpful. So I greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for everyone. Great discussion. Seeing no further discussion, we have had a motion and a second on House Bill 575 as was amended by the committee substitute. Madam Secretary, please call the roll at this time.
Representative Bojanowski,
Pass.
Representative Bowling. Yes. Representative Bratcher,
Yes.
Representative Chester Burton,
Pass.
Representative Graham, Representative Heath,
Yes.
Representative Heverin,
Yes.
Representative Herron,
Yes, I'm going to pass today, but I would like to explain my vote. I do want to get a little bit more information about the potential litigation of legislation such as this, but I do reserve the right to become a yes on the floor. Thank you.
Representative Hodgson, Representative Huff,
Yes.
Representative Imes,
Yes.
Representative Johnson,
Yes.
Representative Maddox,
Yes.
Representative Rawlings,
Yes.
Representative Tate, Representative Tipton,
Yes.
Representative Williams, Representative Witten,
Yes.
Representative Hale.
Yes. House Bill 575, as amended by the committee substitute, passes with 13 yes votes, 4 pass votes with favorable expression. Thank you very much, Representative Heath. Appreciate the good bill and the explanation today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
The next item on our agenda today is House Bill 586, which I am the primary sponsor of that bill, and at this time I'm going to turn the chair position over to my co-chair, Representative Imes.
Representative Hale is, we're taking up House Bill 586 as he's, go ahead and introduce yourself, Representative Hale.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee today. My name is Representative David Hale. I represent the 74th Legislative District here in the state of Kentucky, and I have a guest with me here today, and I would like for him to introduce himself at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rich Storm, Commissioner, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife.
Madam Chairman, there is a committee substitute on House Bill 586. I, at this time, would move for adoption.
Is there a motion on the committee sub? Do you have a question, Representative Bojanowski?
No surprise. Could you explain the difference between the original bill and the committee sub, please?
Yes, ma'am. I would be glad to. To be very frank, Representative Bojanowski, it was part of the difference was a error on my part of not having it worded properly. But then the only change basically is in the definition, and I will explain that to you as we proceed through the bill, was a definition of what a dependent child was and where their residence needed to be as far as to be able to to fish and hunt on their parents' property.
Okay, we need a motion on the committee sub. Okay, committee sub is adopted and is before us. I can't hear.
I think we need to take a voice vote on that, Madam Chair.
Okay. Need a voice vote. I'm sorry. This is new. All those in favor of the committee sub, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Now, Representative Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you taking the gavel there today. And again, members of the committee, it's my privilege today to present to you House Bill 586. This bill was brought to me by my friends at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. It actually is a 50-page bill, but it's not even close to that complicated. There are just a few changes that the department was wanting to implement, and I'm going to go through those rather rapidly. There's actually 6 changes, but and they're all basically pretty simple changes. Change number 1, the department had requested that their officers that they have now, which are actually called conservation officers, many, many years ago, they were referred to as game wardens. And over the course of the years, the term conservation officer was implemented, and their request was to return back to that status of game warden. And I'm going to let Commissioner Storm, he gave me an explanation on this, why he felt that was necessary and would help the department more. So, Commissioner Storm, just give him a quick explanation of that.
Yeah, this is very simple. I'm somebody that likes to do surveys, so we ask our officers multiple questions, but we ask them what they would like to be called in the field. And frankly, by identifying themselves as a conservation officer, people didn't know if they were with soil conservation, they're with parks, they're with any multitude of organizations, but they didn't understand what they were. And so we took a survey, and if you see this blue line, you can see the officers wanted to be called game wardens. And so on a national level, local level, people know when a game warden's coming, they're going to get their license checked, and they're related to both fish and wildlife. So this was driven by my officers, and if I add up all the other names combined, they're not even close to their response. So we brought this very simple, but I think for safety concerns, we'd like to call our officers game wardens.
And let me just actually define in the bill how that states. It says game warden means any member of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources Law Enforcement Division, which is appointed pursuant to Section 8 of this act, who possesses the powers of a peace officer. So Commissioner felt like this was something that would help more in an identification of their peace officers, and so that's the reason for change number 1. Change number 2 in this bill, the water safety patrol officers that maybe you see on the lake if you boat, those officers, over the course of the years, there has been some confusion as to basically who regulated those officers, but they have always been primarily under the auspices of Fish and Wildlife. There have been changes over the years, but what this does, it regulates the water safety enforcement individuals, just regulates them back under the Fish and Wildlife KRS Chapter 235. Definition or change number 3, and this is the one that there was where Representative Bojanowski, there was some kind of confusion on my part as language, but what change 3 does is it defines that a dependent child to have the privileges, and you heard me discuss this the other day in a bill on the House floor that we had rectified from last year about the 5 acres or more, that a lot of confusion was, and who was eligible actually on that land that was owned by the landowners. But what this change here does is it just really codifies that for an independent to have those privileges to hunt or fish on the land that their parents or their guardians own, that they must be a actual resident of that land, a resident of that. They can't be living off in Montana somewhere and still claim residency as to that land. So that's a clarification on that. I think simplifies that pretty easily. Change number 4, it authorizes the holder of a valid sportsman's license here in the state of Kentucky, be that a hunting license or a fishing license, to be able to use department-owned or managed shooting ranges. If you, as a license holder, you are under this, you are permitted to use those shooting ranges that the department operates, that they own, or that they manage. If you are not a license holder, the department is asking that individuals, they're not keeping individuals from using those ranges, but that they would have to purchase a permit to use the department ranges. But if you are a license holder, then you have the right to use that by the fact that you possess a valid Kentucky sportsman's license. Change number 5 and change number 6 are a little different than, and I'm going to let the commissioner here do probably more of the explanation. This deals with 2 groups of individuals. One is called guides, and I'm sure you've heard of those. There are fishing guides, there are hunting guides here in Kentucky, and there are a group of individuals called outfitters. Now, there is a difference in basically what a guide and an outfitter or an outfitter service is. I'm going to allow Commissioner, if he don't mind, to just kind of give a more detailed information and basically what is being proposed here as far as bringing both of these, the guides and the outfitter services, under more regulation by the department. Commissioner Storm.
Thank you again. To be clear on this, our commission would like to be able to promulgate regulations to differentiate between fishing and hunting guides, but then an overarching outfitter. So they actually tried to take action, but we didn't have this in definition. So by having just a guide, that included all 3. So what we'd like to do is be able to promulgate regulations and differentiate those, and I will work with Representative Hale to come up with language. I can tell you the intention for fishing guides oftentimes are smaller operators. We don't intend to raise those fees, but we would like to have clarification that you actually could be a hunting guide, a fishing guide, and an outfitter. You could be all 3, and in the event that you were, then you would be deemed an outfitter. And so this will probably take some time, but I'll say this time next year we won't have that straightened out because it's more than a year-long process for us to promulgate regulations through the commission, and so we'll be working with members of the General Assembly to get these regulations promulgated. I hope I answered that question.
I think you answered it well. We may have some questions on that, but again, I want to say to Commissioner Storm here, in the state of Kentucky, we have a real gem in the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. I think a lot of our citizens actually don't realize how great of a resource that we have here in this state and the revenue that is generated through our hunting and fishing license sales, but so many things even outside of that, and the things that this department does, hunter safety courses, the camps that they provide to the young people to go to camp through the years and to teach and to educate them on fish and wildlife issues and conservation itself. And it's just a great resource that we have here in Kentucky. There are states that have larger departments than us. They have more revenue coming in, different types of revenue than what we basically have. All of the revenue to run this department comes through the sale of hunting and fishing license. There's no general fund monies that goes to this department, and I want to commend the commissioner and the commission members themselves that do a great job in running the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So that's the bill, simply stated.
Motion on the bill.
I appreciate that. If there's questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Okay, we have a few questions.
Okay.
Representative Hale.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, I do have a question, but first I just want to comment. One of my biggest regrets of my childhood is that each year when the conservation camp people came into my elementary school and I went home and said, I want to go to conservation camp, I was never able to go. So, I mean, I just continue to remember that. My question is about the change in between water safety enforcement from the Kentucky State Police and the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. Will that, and this is kind of, I spent some time on the lakes, not a lot, but some. Will that require like major infrastructure changes? Do different divisions have to buy boats or sell boats or something like that? Or is this more channel of guidance change?
So that's a great question. And I can still take you to camps, and that's something I'd like to do. But anyway, this I lost my train of thought here. I apologize. What was your question?
Boating.
The boating. Okay, 30 years ago, it should have been changed. Water Patrol was the Kentucky State Police, and then they transferred it to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. But I guess an oversight, they just never went back and looked at this and addressed it. So I also make this clear. We would be glad for Kentucky State Police to still have authority on Kentucky waters, but in Chapter 16 it says Kentucky State Police is the authority on Kentucky waters. So I have talked to the commissioner of the state police. We've been doing this for many, many years, and ultimately, let's just imagine there was a large drug case on the Ohio River and maybe $100 million of drugs. A decent lawyer is going to look and say, under what authority were you all operating, when it says here the Kentucky State Police is the authority on the water. So it actually is a significant change, even though it's something that probably should have been done 30 years ago. And I would like to take you to camp so we can talk about that after.
Could I just follow up very briefly?
Yes.
Okay, so then the question of, does this mean that one division or the other needs to get more boats, or, I mean, is all the infrastructure already in place?
Yeah,
It's
and
just more of a technical change.
Yeah,
and
that too is a great question. So we already have all the infrastructure. We have federal boat grants, and again, we partner with state police on many different activities and commercial activities, and again, this is just for clarification.
Representative Bojanowski, I would just like to add, you will see, not just with the Water Patrol individuals, but you will see KSP and Fish and Wildlife officers working side by side on many, many major crimes that you see, and they have a great working relationship with each other. And KSP is a great organization, and certainly I know they appreciate the help of the Fish and Wildlife officers, as the Fish and Wildlife officers appreciate their help on many, many instances. So thank you. That was a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Maddox.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I would hope that my questions are in no way perceived as something that is antagonistic towards the good work that you've done on this legislation. I'm appreciative of it, as well as your service in the Kentucky General Assembly. But I have some questions about making the definition of dependent child more stricter, or, philosophically speaking, this overarching theme of continuing to make these definitions more strict. Because to me, making the definitions more strict is not necessarily coming off, or it's not being perceived as a function of protecting animal resources as much as it is driving people to purchase more licenses, making money, in other words. So I would like to hear from Commissioner Storm a little bit more about, what the underlying philosophy is there, but also with regard to the fishing guide components. That has been a topic of particular concern. I've heard a multitude of folks have reached out about that. I would like to hear what the impetus was for that, in so much as they feel like they're being regulated out of existence. They feel like they're being asked to do things that they weren't previously required to do. And what has been explained to me is that it's been said that we want to make sure that we're on par with what other states are doing, so forth, so on. And I believe that as commissioner, your goal would be to do what's best for Kentucky. So I would like to give you an opportunity, if you could, just to give us an idea of why we are regulating them, why we're increasingly asking the legislature for, because I know these regulations went through a committee that I don't sit on, but I did go back and watch that committee hearing, and I'm just trying to get a sense of why we're regulating and tightening and doing all of these things. What's going on?
So commercial activity in my lifetime has changed from almost non-existent to we have a culture of hunters and anglers that go out for one-day experience with a fly fishing guide, for example, or they go with an elk guide to places where they don't know properties and boundaries. But to the regulations we passed, what recently passed was a guide reporting form. And so basically it's what the commission asked us to do is find out how significant this is before we look at a bigger overall picture. So not related to this bill, but your question, we have asked guides to give us some simple explanation as to what they do in a reporting form. I could talk to you all afternoon about fly-by-night guides that have scammed people all over Kentucky, and we get the call and we don't have any authority over those scams. So what we would like to see happen is we would like to see legitimate people with minimal fees go out and take Kentuckians and non-residents to enjoy the resources at a fair price. But the pushback that I have received, and this is very blunt, we don't want anybody to know how much cash we handle, so we don't want to do a reporting form. And I think that's a pretty poor excuse for an answer, but that's the feedback that I've received. And so we want good people doing the right thing. If they're a business and they're a guide service, we want to be able to respond to the public and say that we have looked at this, and I would say that we've been very lenient to this point. And the reporting form, we could probably modify that, and I think we could reduce that. But keep in mind, hunting guides have to fill out one form for a whole year. Fishing guides different, but we'll look at that and be glad to work on it. But that's not related to this piece of legislation.
My mic on, can you hear me? Thank you. I would just like to follow up with, I think that I would be remiss if I didn't provide the feedback that I'm hearing from my constituents, because that's going to help you get to a place where you're accomplishing your goal with tightening these regulations, because I can tell you there are some good folks in the 61st House District that aren't trying to do the things that you've just described there. They're not trying to funnel cash or hide cash or do any of these nefarious things. They enjoy helping other people figure out how to do the sport that they love, plain and simple. And so I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you, Representative Hale. Commissioner, appreciate you bringing this back to the definition of dependent child. As I read this, doesn't this lessen the definition, make it more broader, or that an adult child who happens to live on a property of a parent, say for instance, they're taking care of an elderly parent, they could have the same privileges to hunt or fish on that property without a license. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yes, sir.
And back to, if I could follow up, Madam Chair, back to the issue of the guides and riggers. I've got constituents also who I haven't heard from, but I know I have those individuals who are doing very successful businesses. This can be a very big driver in tourism for Kentucky, because there are people who want to experience the hunting and fishing experiences that we have here in Kentucky. So I think this is a great opportunity. We need to continue to look at ways to improve it and make it more valuable for our constituents in our state. Thank you.
Representative Tipton, if I want to just follow up just a moment, and you're exactly right. That does, on the dependent child, that does broaden that and allows that individual, and you gave some great scenarios there, for them to still have the access and the privileges. To the guides, I know most of you in this this room don't know where I live, but I live 2 miles from Cave Run Lake. Cave Run Lake is the top musky lake in not only Kentucky, the United States of America. Basically, it is one of the top ones in America. I know there's some arguments. Some people from Wisconsin would argue a little bit about that. But there is several guide services of that one species on Cave Run Lake. And they do, and the ones I know, Representative Maddox, they are incredible people. They do things right. They do things the way they're supposed to be done. And they do a tremendous business. I mean, I could call them today, and if I wanted to go with one of them, I probably couldn't get booked with them for 8 or 9 or 10 months from right now. That's how busy they are. And they are bringing a lot of revenue and economic development or economic drive and revenue to that area, which badly needs it. But for the most part, these guides are doing a great job. But we all know that there are some bad actors. And I think that what the commissioner is proposing here will just bring this service and clean it up. And I think it needs to be cleaned up because there are some bad actors in this. But for the most part, most of them aren't, and they're doing a great job. And I just wanted to add that.
Representative Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I just have a comment / question. First, thank you all for bringing this bill forward. And I am someone, as I'm from Madison County, I spent a lot of time fishing growing up. I have never gone hunting before, but spent a lot of time fishing, and I enjoy eating fresh fish. That's a thing that I like to do. And so a lot of people do fish fries during this times. On Fridays, I can be seen at a fish fry any day of the year. But my question has to do with when you all were talking about dependent children and you were talking about the fishing and the hunting. I had never thought about this, but are there, and I understand it's on people's private property, are there
landowners?
Say what?
The landowners.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is there, when we're talking about younger children, when it comes to hunting, are there any regulations of like what that safety looks like? I know that parents are experts and have been, hunting for lifetimes, but is there any type of regulations around what safety is as folks are allowing young people to hunt?
Representative Storm, or Commissioner Storm, I'm sorry.
So absolutely, all 50 states have a hunter education program, and we reciprocate with one another. And so in Kentucky, you have to have at least an 8-hour course and a live fire. And we can tell you all about that and show you how easy it is to accomplish that. And I say easy from the standpoint there's not a lot of barriers, but you can't cheat that system if you do it online. It takes me 8 hours to go through it. It's actually a very good program. There's a free NRA program, so you could actually start that class today, and you could complete it tonight. And so we're proud that we have hunter education in Kentucky, and I'm an instructor, and I'd love to teach a class if anybody would like to join that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Herron. You look like you'd be a good rabbit hunter. You ought to give it a try.
Well, since you said it, I'm just saying.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Bojanowski.
Yes.
Representative Bowling. Yes. Representative Bratcher.
Yes, and I have been at the chairman's house before, and the best part about his house is Sheila's cooking. It's really good, so I vote yes.
Representative Chester Burton.
Yes.
Representative Graham.
I want to just say this. I'm so happy, Representative Hale, that the commissioner and you have worked together to put this together.
Thank you.
And I vote yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Heath.
Yes.
Representative Heverin.
Yes.
Representative Herron.
Yes.
Representative Hodgson. Representative Huff.
Yes.
Representative Imes.
Yes.
Representative Johnson.
First, I have dreams of someday seeing the chairman's house, and I do vote yes.
Representative Maddox,
May I explain my vote, please? I'm not going to vote no on the chairman's bill today, and I appreciate the fact that you've gone to such lengths to articulate this. I do want to talk to you more, both of you more, about what's going on here and what I'm seeing and hearing, and I'm going to pass today, but I do appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Rawlings,
Yes.
Representative Tate, Representative Tipton,
Yes.
Representative Williams, Representative Witten,
Yes.
Representative Hale.
Yes.
Okay, with 16 yes and 1 pass, House Bill 586 as amended by the committee substitute passes with favorable expression. No further business. I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Committee, thank you.